But we asked you what your favorite Nitro moments were. And the choices we listed were the initial show at Mall of America, Scott Hall's surprise debut to kick off the NWO storyline, Goldberg's world title win at the Georgia Dome, and a write-in option. And as of this recording, Hall's debut is just running away with the vote, which I guess is sort of to be expected. But that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is that of the fans who went to the other option and wrote in their comments, a huge portion of them picked Lex Luger's world title win over Hogan in Detroit on the 100th episode of Nitro, which I guess also doubled as like the go home show for Road Wild 1997. That was on my honorable mention list last week, but I feel like that show in particular, I don't know, fans, maybe it's because that they've come around and fallen in love with Lex Luger again in recent years. I'm not sure, but why do you think this is getting so much support now? I don't know that would have always been the case. Is it just the way people feel about Lex, or is it something else?
I think it probably has something to do with Lex's story and where Lex was, where he's been, and where he is now. It's a fascinating story, by the way.
Yes. Yes.
Shouldn't be a movie, actually. It could be someday. But I think a lot of it has to do with just, looking back at everything Lex went through and where he is. But I also think it has a lot to do with the fact that nobody saw that coming. I mean, from Lex on down, that was like from out of nowhere. And that was one of the things that made Nitro such a special show, because we would do stuff like that. And that may have something to do with it as well.
Well, we're excited to hear what you guys think. So if you haven't already, go hit that button over there, the subscribe button. I'm curious, though, do you remember, if you can take yourself back, and I know that's a challenge, to August of 97, was that really the primary reason? You just wanted to give a surprise? You knew you were going to switch the title back, so long-term it wouldn't necessarily affect the storyline. As a reminder, this is before Hogan has his collision, if you will, at Starrcade with Sting. So I'm just fascinated why you would even entertain the idea. I feel like some traditional bookers may say, oh no, you got to make them wait for it. But because you're going to give the belt back in just a few days, I mean, I think in that era, Road Wild was on Saturday, so you're only talking a handful of days. But is it to push pay-per-view buys? Is it to just commemorate the 100th episode? Or is it just the Sarsa formula? You got to have a surprise every now and again. And long-term, you can get right back on track if you put the belt on Hogan. Or is it something else?
No, I think you hit it right on the head. There's two answers to it. One is the Sarsa formula, definitely story anticipation, reality, surprise in action. And surprises can come in a lot of different forms, right? The surprise of Lex Luger showing up when everybody thought he was working for the WWF. That was a pretty major surprise. But also, if you think about the television audience and when, they're following wrestling every week, and as you put it, a lot of traditional wrestling creative would dictate that, oh no, you make them wait for it, you make it a big deal, you only do it on a pay-per-view or at a major house show. And part of the success of Nitro was not only just surprises for the sake of surprises, but also kind of just breaking up the flow of expectation. When people get patterned, we'll talk more about viewing habits, I'm sure, during the show, based on a tweet that I got last week and I forwarded to you. But when people get into a rhythm, their expectations get into a rhythm, and sometimes breaking that rhythm kind of wakes them up. And it's a little bit like Scott Hall coming down through the crowd, right? Nobody had ever seen that before. That's not supposed to happen. Wow, this must be real. And I think in this case, having a world title change hands on television, particularly in a Hogan match, nobody expected to see that. And the fact that they got it, and they got it for free, was a wonderful thing. But it also just made people realize, man, I can't afford to miss a Nitro. For a long time, it's different now because of, everybody is so cognizant of streaming, but and your ability to watch things on different devices and all that. We all know that story. But Back in 1997, that wasn't the case. And everybody was, if you were a television producer, a major television producer, for a primetime series, drama, action, whatever it may be, managing viewing habits was a big part of becoming what used to be called must-see TV. I mean, that was a branding slogan. I think it was for NBC back in the late 90s. Everybody was trying to create must-see TV. Well, how do you create must-see TV? By doing things that reinforce the fact that sometimes big shit happens, not on a pay-per-view, but on your weekly television show. So it was, and the fact that we knew we were going to be able to kind of get back on track the following week had something to do with it. It made it easy for us. But I firmly believe that breaking up the viewing pattern also reinforced the must-see TV kind of mantra that everybody had, including Nitro.
I do want to ask you, when you think back on just how monumental that moment was, I mean, if you go back and you watch Luger's title win at the 100th Nitro, the crowd goes bananas in a way that you almost never saw on Nitro. I mean, you certainly saw it the following year with Goldberg, but this was a major moment, a major happening. And to have the rest of the locker room celebrate with him, I think you could make an argument that at that very moment, Lex Luger might have been one of the most over baby faces in the business. Don't get me wrong, Steve Austin is getting hot, but man, WCW's firmly in control in 97. And we know that Sting is certainly the most over baby face in WCW, but he's not really active. He's in the rafters. So as far as the guys in the ring, I think you could have made an argument that, hey, we should go with Luger. And it's not lost on me that this is the same building where he lost his match for the title in the WWF against Yokozuna a few SummerSlams prior to this. Do you remember did Kevin Sullivan or anyone advocate and say, you know, Eric, what if we just rode this out? I mean, I know you'd made Sting and we're on a collision course there, but it felt like Luger had finally reached the upper echelon and fans were for it. And once upon a time, the timing was off in WCW. Flair had just left and went to the WWF, and he was sort of shoehorned in, and it was just not the same. But 6 years later, it feels organic. Hey, the fans are really with him. Is there an alternate universe where you keep that title on Luger and ride it out? Or was that never going to work with the success of the NWO?
No, with the success of the NWO, and I was pretty fixated on that long-term story and building Sting and the Crow character. That was my primary goal. I didn't mind a stutter step like this one along the way. And in a way, thinking about it now, I don't think I had this thought at the time, but you know, looking back at it, I think it also gave the fans hope, because in 1997, WCW didn't have a lot of hope. They were getting crushed by the NWO by design. But that one night with Lex Luger allowed the audience to believe, hey, this could come to an end. As dominant as NWO was, at least there's hope. And hope spots are very valuable. They're very valuable in the psychology and the way matches are laid out. You want the audience to feel those hope spots for your babyface when they're getting pummeled and they're starting to just about ready to make their comeback. Hope spots are important in a match, but they're also important, I think, in long-term storytelling. But in all honesty, that thought didn't cross my mind then. Breaking up the viewing pattern did, which is one of the reasons we did it. But looking back, yeah, I think it also gave that hardcore WCW fan that wasn't into the NWO, it gave him hope.
I want to ask you, as luck would have it, on this week's episode of Click This, Kevin Nash, in the context of arguing that LA Knight should have gotten a brief run as the world heavyweight champion coming out of Clash in Paris, he brought up the parallel that it was him that convinced you to give Luger the title win, specifically because Lex had gotten too hot to ignore and not to just wait and put it off until Sting had his turn. And it would also sort of break up some of the monotony. Do you remember Kevin Nash being an advocate for this back in 97? Because that makes sense, right? Timeline-wise.
No, he definitely was. Look, Kevin, and I've said this many times in the past, and I know oftentimes when we're doing this podcast, because I'm the one, answering the questions, I sometimes too frequently, well, I made this decision. This was why I did this. This is why I did that. And when it came to the NWO, as I've said many times, but I think this is a great place to reinforce it, it really was a collaborative effort. I mean, I think I was single-handedly responsible because I did it in a vacuum and I didn't want to share the creative that I was working through in my own head with anybody for a long time. But once the NWO, once we pulled the trigger, it really was a collaborative effort. Kevin Sullivan led that effort, but Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, particularly with anything related to the NWO, because their fingerprints, more so than mine, by 1997, their fingerprints were all over this along with Kevin Sullivan's. So yeah, absolutely do remember. Kevin was very much engaged and I liked his thought process. It doesn't mean I liked every one of his ideas, just like I don't like every one of my ideas to this very day. I'm capable of coming up with an idea that, you know, Monday afternoon, I think is a wonderful idea. And by Tuesday morning, wake up and go, no, that really isn't that great. In fact, it kind of sucks. But by this time in 1997, if it had anything to do with the NWO, whether it was Kevin or myself, Kevin Sullivan or myself, we very much included Scott and Kevin because they just had an amazing feel for the NWO and its story.
SaveWithConrad.com.
My name's Daryl, came from Massachusetts, and I moved to Wisconsin. And there's a lot of people that might be asking, why go with Conrad? Why go with Supreme Lending? And let me tell you something, brother. I think about the credentials, the tag team partner that I'd be working with. First of all, we got the podfather himself, Conrad. How can you go wrong with that? And then also go on to SaveWithEric.com, which, you know, who else could have kicked Vince's ass for 83 consecutive weeks? You can't beat that duo right there. But they did bring a secret weapon, and I didn't realize this because this was not advertised. I worked closely with Larry the Axe Thompson. And let me tell you, with all the stress with moving across the country with a large family that I have, it was reassuring to know that I had the enforcer at my back, handling questions from the other side of sellers, the other side with trying to find the right prices. He took care of all that. All I had to do was keep my eye on the prize and make it there to Wisconsin. They were absolutely fantastic. They checked in on me, especially Francis, very patient with me. I don't go through this process all the time, so I trusted the experts. I was able to call them. They called me if they had questions, and it felt like it was a personal arrangement. There was even a point in which, from the seller side, they wanted something else that wasn't part of the norm. Francis straight up told me, hey, we're loyal to you. We'll do whatever you want to do, and we'll make sure that you guys are taken care of. They came through. I made it to the dream. I'm the champion of my own destiny here. They were able to help pave the way for me and my family. I couldn't be more happy with the results. I went from having less than an acre to now 20 acres worth of land. They made that dream a reality. I'm Daryl, and I'm living in Friendship, Wisconsin, in my dream home, thanks to SaveWithConrad.com.
NMLS number 212, non-equal housing lender. SaveWithConrad.com.